What's happening, Jay?
Hey Warren, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Sorry, 2 minutes late.
No, you're good, man. You're good. So, where are you in LA right now?
San Francisco.
Oh, okay. And is that where you live, or are you still in the Baltimore area?
No, I still live in Baltimore. I'm just I work with a group out here called the SF Jazz Collective. So uh every October, this is my 10-year anniversary. I mean, not that we're marking that, but this is my 10th year in the band. So every October, I spend a month out here in San Francisco,
Okay.
and I'm residence with the SF Jazz Collective. And yeah, this is why I wanted to do it at this time because my rehearsal starts in exactly 1 hour.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get you there. No problem.
No, I'm cool. I got time.
Cool. So, the album. Maybe we could start there.
Yeah.
The history of the vibraphone.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool album, man. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, it seems fairly obvious from the title, but talk about the concept of the record and like when you thought to do this album.
Well, I've been touring this project for about 2 years now. I mean, I have a number of different projects that I like because I'm really heavy into like R&B and fusion, but
Yeah.
there's always somebody like when I meet them in the airport or wherever, they're just like, "What do you play?" And I'm like, "I play the vibraphone," and they have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, do you know what the bells are? The thing you played in grade school or the xylophone?" They were like, "Oh yeah." So I just started to think, even though the vibraphone is technically still new to a lot of people, even though it's out for like 100 years now.
Yeah.
And this has been done before because I think the last person, to my knowledge, who's done a record like this, but to a little bit less degree, was Gary Burton. He came out with his record, I think around 1999. It was called For Hamp Bags and Red or something like that. I forget the name of the record. But I decided to take his concept, but just go a step further. And I wanted to create like more of a history lesson. Like what Gary did, he just took a lot of the songs and made arrangements of them. What I decided to do was just take the songs and just play them straight down, like without arrangements, without any complications. But I wanted to, complicated music form. But I wanted to make sure I wanted to pay tribute to each artist to show how the sound of the instrument has changed from way back in the day and how it's like changed all the way up till today. And also, not just from a vibraphone perspective, you also know if you listen to the band as well, you actually hear how music has changed in general because we're going from like early swing to like the stuff that people used to dance to third stream to bossa novas, fusion, adult contemporary, a whole bunch of stuff. So
Yeah.
but that was my concept. I wanted to just give people a history lesson and get to know some of these other players. Oh, that's the most important thing. Most people, when it comes to the vibraphone, they only really, I mean, like, I'm not talking about jazz fans or music fans. I'm talking about just regular people who might have heard of it. They probably only heard of Lionel Hampton or Roy Ayers. And I wanted to let people know that here's a lot of other people that you may not have heard of who are great on this instrument.
Yeah, and I think you definitely accomplished that, and it's chronological for the most part. It seems.
Yeah.
Although I think, I was thinking about you have Terry Gibbs, I believe, is the first track, and then Lionel Hampton, and I couldn't remember who was kind of first in that.
Yeah, that's the tricky part around there. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't want to do a chronological like tune wise, but definitely like as far as like who came first, I wasn't really sure. I mean, if I really wanted to say who came first, I would probably say Red Norvo, but I didn't include him on this particular record. Like I was telling a lot of people, we'll save that probably for part two.
Yeah, that's funny that you mentioned that because that was one of my questions. It's like you got everyone in there mostly, the bigger names, but the one omission that I could think of, like if I was going down the top 12 most known vibraphonist, I thought Norvo was one of those guys.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Norvo, Mike Mainieri, Walt
Mm,
Dickerson,
yeah,
to a to a certain degree, Tito Puente.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and even some of the younger folks who are playing today. So there will definitely be more. And I've already had a little bit of flack from some people like, why didn't you include this person? I'm just like, I only have 40 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, right.
So
Yeah. No, but it's really cool how you did it. And you know, the vibraphone's an interesting instrument. And teaching jazz history courses and stuff, I always like it's one of those instruments it's kind of hard to explain in the sense
mhm.
like number one, I wonder why, and maybe you can give me your thoughts on this. Out of all the pitch percussion instruments, why the vibraphone in jazz? Why was that the one that's sort of most connected?
um, I really don't know. I mean, who knows what the world could have, what the music world could have been like if it was marimba that was chosen instead
Yeah.
at the full time, and vibraphone was like, oh, that's the side thing. I don't know. Maybe it probably could have been because of what Lionel Hampton contributed to it.
Mhm.
People have seen they, he started out as playing drums and then he saw some vibes in the corner and was like, oh, let me just play this. So I don't know. Maybe people just like that bell-like tone that goes along with the music. It also it could be a possibility people, depending on what style of music you're playing, it frees up like certain rhythm patterns that maybe a pianist or guitarist would do. And
Yeah.
the vibes can just like lay a chord down more like sounds, but who knows?
It's interesting how things happen like that. But I think you make a good point. It's like Hampton had such a big musical personality and also such a great stage presence, especially like and Benny Goodman was such a big star at that time when he
Yep.
introduced Hampton to a wider audience.
Yep.
And I think really his personality really and his obviously his skill level
Hmm.
might be the reason, you know, maybe that he just had such a big mark on early
Yeah.
jazz, you know.
Yeah. Definitely.
Very cool. So, you know, of all the tracks, they're all great, but there's a couple I wanted to ask you about. Uh,
Hmm.
Señor Mouse and Gary Burton. So, could you just kind of talk about how Burton's approach was so different from that of maybe like a Lionel Hampton or Milt Jackson or something?
I believe Gary brought more of a modern sound to the instrument. I mean, Bobby Hutcherson is right there, but Gary just took it and pushed it to another level. Um, Almost classical-ish a little bit, but just still flowing and still swinging, but it's just more modern. Um, Definitely for the sound that was happening. It's like that track is one of my favorite tracks when you're listening to Crystal Silence when they just play a duo.
Hmm.
The idea behind it, when what I did was to combine what Gary and Chick did, but then right in the middle of the song, I go over to Return to Forever
Yeah.
and give it the treatment that Chick gave minus vibes, but just still, just adding a saxophone to it. Um, I read in Gary's book, I guess I could describe it this way. Gary considered, and he said this himself, I'm quoting this, that he was the first musician to dabble in rock jazz.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
a lot of people could probably claim that too.
Right.
But he said he was the first one. So I don't know. I mean, I think maybe that's the style of the sense that I kind of brought to it, but I still wanted to bring that lush classical flow to it a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's one of the standout tracks from the record, and yeah, it is kind of cool how you combine those sort of those two recordings, you know,
Yeah,
into
yeah.
one. Did you know Gary or do you know Gary? Berklee connection and all.
Yeah, a lot of people thought when I went to Berklee, because that was at that point in time, this was 1997 when I entered there as a freshman. A lot of people connected Gary Burton to teaching vibes at that point in time. Now he did teach at one point, but not at the time when I was there. When I arrived at Berklee, he was vice president
Yes.
of the school. Um, I actually studied with the other person who I actually paid tribute to on his record, Dave Samuels.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely knew Gary. We did a couple of things together. Matter of fact, there's a clip online on YouTube where you can see me and Gary playing Señor Mouse duo
Oh,
at
cool.
Detroit Jazz Festival. That was probably in 2017, somewhere around there. I can't remember. I played marimba. He got on the vibes. So
Mm, very nice. So what years were you? We must have missed each other. What years were you at Berklee?
97 through 2001. And right after I finished my studies there, I took a year just to kind of chill out because I still like playing with certain musicians up there. And then I was on faculty in the percussion department from 2002 through 2004. And that's when I left Boston completely and I moved back to Baltimore.
Okay, cool. So I was 94 to 98 at Berklee.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And I do remember Gary kind of more walking around than than teaching classes. And yeah, he was he was vice president at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So then let's bring you another track that I really enjoyed was Spring High and Dave Samuels. And obviously you have a close connection with Samuels. So can you kind of talk about his influence on you and just anything Dave Samuels you want to add?
To be honest, Dave was like my number one influence. Not in all of music, but at least when it comes to the instrument. So one thing about me, I really have never, I don't have like this big, I'll just say CDs because that's what I was buying a lot. I don't
Yeah.
have a CD collection of vibraphone players. I do have a few because I wanted to get a concept of what the instrument would sound like from many different players. So coming up as a kid, when I would finish practicing with my dad was a vibraphonist as well.
Mhm.
Would always play games of pool, billiards. And
Sure.
one of the tracks, we of course we will have music. We didn't just play pool in solid, so I will always put on some music. One of the songs that I will always put on was Morning Dance by Spiral Gyra. Now, Dave did not play vibraphone on that track. He played marimba. Now,
Mhm.
I had a hard time really trying to understand improv back then, but when hearing this track, I was like, I kind of understand what's going on a little bit.
Right.
It
Yeah.
kind of like light bulbs went off. So come time when I graduated from the Baltimore School for the Arts, I had two choices. Because I was heavy into GRP big band, and I
Mhm.
really wanted to go to Miami. So I was like, I got to go down there and study with Arturo Sandoval. But my dad was like, no, you're going to go to Boston and study with Dave Samuels. I was like, oh wow, Dave works there. Okay, let's do that. So Dave was my teacher for 6 straight semesters, which is what, 3 years. And
Yep.
then my seventh semester, I actually switched and I wanted to just check out somebody else, Ed Sandin at Berklee.
Yep.
But Ed was great, but he didn't work for me. I needed some more. And I went back to for Dave. So 7 of 8 semesters, I was with Dave Samuels. He was a great friend. We lost him, maybe 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think he was one of those players that people just kind of forget about. And he was just a fabulous player, just kind of really, really brought that contemporary sound to the instrument.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, I think my foray into jazz might have been similar. Well, you grew up with a father who was into obviously well-respected musician, but I think I do remember Spyro Gyro being like a major influence early on. And
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people who kind of grew up more in a rock background and sort of shifted into
Mm-hmm.
jazz, that was like one of those groups. But I think you're right in the sense that he's a little bit disregarded. Maybe because he was so heavily like associated with that sound in that group because they were so popular, but also his Caribbean jazz project stuff. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have to tell you, just a phenomenal player.
No, that's true. I mean, you never really saw him playing the jazz clubs.
Right.
He just hit everything else. I like to look at it. I think somebody quoted him once as one of the highest paid mallet players in the 80s.
Yeah, probably.
And Spiral Gyro was really popular at that time. I mean, they still are popular, but at that point in time, they were really like at the top of their game. So
Yeah. Yeah, and those GRP albums, they just have a very specific sound.
yeah,
It's like a moment in time.
yeah.
Uh,
And just to go backwards, Gary was a part of that GRP thing too, which is what I really liked. Like the GRP All Star Big Band, Gary was a special guest in there, along with Eddie Daniels and Dave Valentine and a few other folks. So
oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I always associate him with the ECM movement and all that.
mhm.
But
Yep.
yeah, obviously. But was he the first now, remind me, was he the first to use two mallets in each hand, like the four mallet technique, or did that come
Um, it was either him or Bobby Hutcherson.
Mhm.
I'm not sure which one, but yeah, it was definitely between one or two.
Pretty cool. And then you wrote this song, I believe. I See You Baby Looking at Me. Is that you?
Yeah,
That's a cool track. It like kind of showcasing the vibes in a more of a funky type of format. Uh,
definitely. just, in today's world, I mean, I'm a fan of all. I one of the things I tell my students is to really try to check out every possible thing that you can, and just be a fan of music, and just, try to absorb it all. So I've always been, because even though I was born in '79, I'm a '90s kid,
Yeah.
and a lot of the stuff that I grew up listening to, was definitely a lot of like hip hop and R&B and things like that. Not necessarily the stuff that's playing today, maybe a little bit, but I hear that stuff. And then my dad in the '80s was playing a lot of still Motown, Anita Baker, Spiral Gyro, Yellow Jackets, Grover Washington. So it's like I'm hearing all these different sounds, and what led me to write that song. Honestly, it came from the soundtrack. If you listen to the drum groove, it came from the soundtrack of Superfly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I forget what song is on that, but there's a song on that that I heard, and I heard this groove, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I decided to take that same groove, put it on my song, and just give it a repetitive melody. Because sometimes I believe, the people who come to see you, not everybody, but they don't really understand all of the notes and the harmony and stuff like that. But what they do understand is feeling and groove. So I decided to put a simple melody that's kind of repetitive, and it's not moving around a lot. Some chords that felt great, and it's just a really chill, laid back tune. So
Yeah. No, it's
the whole thing with this whole project was also, I wanted to note this, is that I also wanted to play in the style of each person, which is really hard to do. And along with the band has to do it as well. So
yeah, yeah, and a great band. I mean, are these musicians you work with regularly, or just for
yeah,
this record?
for the most part, like the most steady person has been the saxophonist Tim Green. I think he's been on maybe like 4 or 5 of my projects. The pianist Alex Brown, we've been working together. I mean, he's my number one call. I call him for pretty much any and everything I do for at least the past 15 years. Drummer CV Dashiell, this is his third project with me, I think. And the bassist Vicente Archer. He's just a phenomenal bass player. This is the second time we've recorded. My very first record ever as a leader was a Japanese import called Incredible Jazz Vibes. That was featuring me, Vicente, Kendrick Scott, and Mulgrew Miller. We recorded that about 20 years ago. But Vicente and I, we were roommates in college. He went to Northeastern University. We just really good friends, and I just felt I had to include him on this one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's a great bass player for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. All right, so if I can go back, because you've mentioned a few times, can you talk about your musical upbringing in Baltimore?
Yeah. So I started out playing classical music. I started playing at the age of 3.
Crazy.
Well, not just vibes. It was just my dad. He was a player, but that was not his main job by choice. He was a history teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. He taught United States and world history, but he trained me to play at a very young age, to play vibes and marimba, xylophone, like the combination of all 3 of those, drum set, and piano studies and stuff like that. So my practice schedule, just to give you the short story of it, consisted every day of 30 minutes on each instrument. Not each, like 30 minutes on vibes, 30 minutes on. They could have been mixed up, but one day was this and whatever else. So 30 minutes on mallets, I'll say that. 30 minutes on drum set. That could have easily switched over to snare drum studies, and 30 minutes on keyboard studies. That my practice schedule lasted pretty much 6 days per week for 15 years of those 90-minute sessions. And also on Saturdays, I was taking lessons at the Peabody Prep with this guy named Leo LePage. He was a member of the Baltimore Symphony. He's now deceased. So I pretty much came up as a classical musician. I thought I was going to play classical. I was the principal timpanist for a youth orchestra at Peabody called the Peabody Sinfonia. One of my first tours with that group, we actually went to Holland, Amsterdam, Rotterdam for about 2 weeks. I was maybe about 10 years old. I've always looked at my career as in 2 different halves. There's the kid me, like from age 3 until 17, and then that high school gap where I pretty much didn't do anything. And combined with the college years, I didn't, I started switching gears. So yeah, I grew up as a classical musician. My dad was teaching me jazz. His group would play around Baltimore, DC a lot, playing a lot of contemporary stuff, not a lot of not based in swing. If they did play anything swing, it would be along the Stanley Torrentine book or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad would teach me the blues a lot, which is I think the best thing to learn. You know, this is one of the things I do with my kids a lot. I try to teach them before we learn all these chord changes and how to do all that. Let's learn some blues, because chances are any type of band that you get in, rock, blues, jazz, whatever, if they actually do a solo, it's gonna be a blues.
Yeah,
Got to play some type of bluesy pattern.
yeah.
So yeah, I came up with classical, and that was pretty much it. You know, I stuck with classical and I learned my instruments for many years, and right around high school is when I started to slowly, you know, just stop playing classical. And I was actually really good at it, but you know, it was time to do something else. So
Do you ever think you're going to return to it?
I would love to. I mean, there's been some times I even thought about auditioning for a symphony orchestra, but
Yeah.
I only want to audition for one orchestra, and I'm only saying that it would be the Baltimore Symphony because my wife has said I'm not moving anywhere. So, but it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy classical music. There's plenty of times when I will go to the symphony hall and listen to music. Even in my school, I teach at the Peabody Conservatory.
Sure.
Sometimes they may have the symphony orchestra maybe rehearsing. If I have time, I'll just sit down and listen, because there's a lot of movements in classical that I associate with my own music, certain harmonies. You know, then I definitely paid attention to all of the stuff in school. So I try to incorporate some of that stuff in my own stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's funny, man, when you play an instrument that kind of, so I'm primarily an upright bass player.
Mm-hmm.
Also started out, classically trained, I would say, but it's really hard to navigate both of those worlds. And
Yeah,
you know, but yeah, there is a desire. Sometimes I'm like, man, it'd be really cool to be up there bowing with the symphony.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah, cool, man. So, the Baltimore scene. Weirdly, I'm not far. I'm in New Jersey, but I really
Mm-hmm.
don't know much about Baltimore jazz, the current Baltimore jazz scene. I know there's been quite a few players who were associated with Baltimore.
Yeah.
Can you describe the jazz scene kind of maybe when you were growing up and now what it's like today?
From what I remember growing up, it was more like a lot of organ trios, organ quartets, and things like that.
Right.
Um, I gotta be honest with you, I didn't really hang out but so much when I was a kid. When I was in high school, I mean, outside of the times my dad would sometimes sneak me off and get me into his sets with his band.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot different now, you know, nowadays, because I remember back then, my dad and his band, their set didn't start until 1 o'clock. They would play easily from 1 to 4 in the morning. So naturally I couldn't stay out that late because I had school. But a lot of organ trios. One of the first people that I met coming up was alto saxophonist Antonio Hart.
Sure.
Antonio Hart used to live around the corner from me, and he used to take lessons with my dad. I remember I was working on the tune by Clifford Brown, Joy Spring, and I just couldn't get it. And my dad was like, I remember Antonio was leaving one day, and my dad says, "Hey man, before you leave, can we play this tune for my son?" And I believe Antonio Hart was still in high school, the same high school I went to. Uh,
Mhm.
so he poured out his horn and he read that thing down like that, and I was like, "Damn, how you do that?" um, so I didn't really hang out but so much, but we definitely had some players. There was this trumpet player who's still active today. His name is Dante Winslow. Very good jazz player, but he's really, really deep into the pop world right now. Dante is out with Justin Timberlake in the
Oh,
horn section. But I think he still does a lot of arranging, like for the Emmys and stuff like that. It's still kind of jazz oriented, but just not necessarily in the jazz world. Um, so my memory is not vague, but it's just very bleak. I didn't do too much of that back then. Now
mm,
I was always familiar with some of the players that we had. Like I do recall this. You'll probably trip about this. When I was about 7 years old, now I didn't know who these guys were at the time. 7 years old, I had done a record with this local drummer named William Goffigan. On this record, it was Gary Thomas, Tom Harrell, and Cyrus Chestnut.
and you're
seven
seven?
years old. Yeah, I have no idea who these guys are. I'm just like, all right, cool. Somebody just asked me to come in. And when
Yeah.
I listened to it, it's not that bad. I checked it out. I was like, oh, this is okay. Um, but we've had so many players. You know, there's a lot of history when it comes to Baltimore jazz. You know, like again, Gary Thomas, Antonio Cyrus, Mark Gross, Dennis Chambers. Um, you know, those are some of like the bigger names that who are from Baltimore. Of course, we have the Cab Callaways and UB Blakes and Billie Holidays,
Yeah.
and there's a few more like Ethel Ennis and some others. Today, we have since our program at Peabody has got a jump start, we have a lot of great players there. Well, at least for our faculty at Peabody, is led by Sean Jones. And then there's myself and Tim Green, Chris Fun, Chardonnay Wade, Allison Miller, Marvin Sewell, a few other people. And our program, we have boosted like about 70 kids in our program, which is pretty max. And it's amazing because I think when we started the program 5 years ago, we only had 6.
That's a big jump, yeah.
Students, and now we're at 70 almost.
That's cool.
We have a lot of great players there. Like pianist Mark Carey has moved to the area. Bassist by the name of Obasi Okoto is there. Along with honestly a lot of the military guys. The military guys. Now, it's funny about them, and I love those guys. They don't have to come out and play. They just go to work and play some big band charts for 2 hours a day, and they're done.
Right.
They get a nice check. But then there are the certain guys who are in those military bands, and a lot of them live actually in Baltimore. The reason being is because, living in DC is really expensive, and a lot of the some of the guys may live in Arlington, Virginia, but a lot of them live in Baltimore because Baltimore is very reasonable to live. So, but we have a lot of places to play. We have Keystone Korner, a place called Andy Musik, and another spot called the Caton Castle. So those are the 3 main venues in Baltimore. And we have lots of musicians. We have thriving jam sessions that's happening pretty much at least 4 nights out of the week. I don't necessarily play like as the hired person at these jam sessions, but I do go out. I don't want to be one of those musicians who just like, oh, I'm working with Christian McBride and SF Jazz Collective, but I don't need to go out. But it's important for me to go out so I can hear who's playing and hear the youthfulness, and because once upon a time I was that guy.
Yeah.
And I was always looking forward to being around older musicians. I tell a lot of my students, try to be around some older musicians, and not necessarily just getting lessons from them. Just hang with them. Talk to them. Just soak it up and ask questions that way. So Baltimore jazz is really good, combined with DC as well. I got to give them some love as well. DC jazz between the two cities, because we're only 30 minutes apart, depending on traffic.
I was gonna say,
we're only 30 minutes apart for the most part. So a lot of us, we always come back and forth between the 2 cities, and we're always playing together as a fellowship.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, every city's got its own thing. Keystone Korner is the one that always comes to mind when I'm thinking Baltimore jazz. But yeah, that's cool. So one of the things that struck me, only because we're pretty much of the same age, and the Berklee connection, was Wally's Jazz Club. I saw that you were playing there, and I lived on the corner of Mass Ave and Washington Street, so I walked by Wally's every day, and I would go and listen. At that time, I was intimidated by the level of musicianship at Wally's. Other jam sessions, cool, man. Nope, I was good, and I probably could have played there, but it was just such a wild scene there. What do you remember from Wally's?
When I first got to Boston, at least for the jazz night, I mean, eventually I got to know the other musicians on the funk nights and Latin night. The drummer on jazz night was a guy named John Lampkin, along with trumpeter Darren Barrett.
Yeah.
And naturally, John, who's from Baltimore, when he found out there was another Baltimorean in the area, he's like, "Oh yeah, I knew this kid," and he would invite me down to play. And it was kind of nerve-wracking because I was like, wow, my first gig, I'm only 17 years old. They let me play all the tunes that I knew. But then the next night they say, yeah, come back. You sound pretty good. You just need to, again, being around older people, we hear the promise in you, but you just got to keep playing. So I came back the next night and they called a whole different pile of tunes that I had no idea. I was like, I've never heard of any of these tunes, but I just soaked it in and and just, checked out as much as I can. So eventually, in 2000, around after about 3 years, that became my gig,
Mm-hmm.
but as a drummer.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
wasn't playing any vibes there. I led a group with trumpeter Jason Palmer and,
Mhm.
and some other friends of mine. So I led that group for almost 3 years at Wiley's before I moved, but we had a great time there. And there were some other places in Boston we used to play at the time. Like I actually had so how it worked for me for the regular gigs, every Thursday night I would play at the Wonder Bar. You remember that place?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was my piano gig.
Okay.
So I played it every Thursday. Friday and Saturday was my drum gig at Wiley's. And then Sunday afternoon was also a drum gig for me, but that was the jam session.
Mm.
Um, and when it came to vibes, every now and then somebody, like I used to work with this guy named Darren Simon. He had a little entertainment agency up there. So we would play. Now, this is when I would play a lot of vibes. I would play at, tons of weddings and
Mm-hmm.
around some bar mitzvahs and stuff like that. And then the last place that I recall playing at a lot up there was uh the Good Life.
That place, I don't remember that one.
Oh man, yeah, they had 3 locations. So there was one downtown Boston, then there was one in what is that, Central Square, like
Yeah.
along
Mhm.
Mass Ave, the Red Line. And there was another small one actually in Back Bay, but they didn't have music there.
Okay.
So but we would play there often. But yeah, Boston was great, man. I mean, I played around a lot, just in any any place that I could get my hands on. If somebody called, I was there. We didn't have cell phones back then, so did I have a cell phone? I can't remember how people called. I really don't remember how people called for gigs back then.
It was we might I think at that time we had definitely not the smartphones, but
Yeah, it was
Nokia,
something.
I think I had the Nokia back then.
Yeah,
Maybe
it was that.
I was mostly the phone though. It was mostly just
It was
hard line.
and now that I think about it, for me, it was home. I had a home phone. I had yeah, the cell phones were in, but sending text was not
Not a thing.
not
No,
like this.
no. And you paid for each character, if I remember
That's
correctly.
right. We're like,
Yeah.
yeah, you got to make this quick. If you
Yeah.
call me, you call, like, no, you call me after 9 o'clock, ask me for the gig.
No, no, Boston it did at the time and probably still. I hadn't been there for a number of years. I was just there like 6 weeks ago. Was
Okay.
all. But yeah, I remember being able to play quite a bit,
Yeah.
and I had a steady thing. I doubt you remember this. It was a restaurant called Jacob Worth's.
Yeah.
I used to play there it was every Friday, and
Hmm.
and it was cool. And some people would come and sit in for sure. And
Yeah. I definitely played that because they had the upright piano in there.
right,
That,
right, right, in the
that's the
corner.
wall. Yep.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
played.
that's
I can't remember the guy I used to play with, but it was a drummer. But yeah, it was that one, and then there was another restaurant down that way called the Zigglemites.
yep. I remember that place too.
You
Yeah,
had to climb up the ladder.
yeah, that's
And
another.
that was, man, that just to say it, that was a great gig for me too. Why? Because so I used to play piano there with this lady named Beulah Lawrence,
Hmm.
older woman. I remember doing it one time. There's one particular time it was myself and uh Berklee faculty, this bass player named Ron McD and drummer Charles Haynes. Charles Haynes is doing many great things. But I remember I got a lesson, and not an actual lesson, but it was a lesson. Eula would do things like she would say a tune like How High the Moon. Now, most people in this world, if they call that tune, we're immediately going to think the key of G.
Yeah.
But Eula, she would, because of her voice, she's a vocalist. She would do like How High the Moon, 5 flats, 1, 2, and I was like, shit,
So
stop.
yeah.
I was like, wait, I got to get the key. I don't even know what 5 flats is. I had to think about it for a second. But that was the lesson for me that was learn as much material, especially those type of songs that
Mhm.
people sing. Learn all of that stuff in multiple keys, and they actually carried over to the vibes as well. So
No, that's totally true. And like now, of course, everyone's got the iReal thing, and they can change keys by pushing a button.
and we ain't have that back then. Just like if
Oh,
you know this tune, you don't know it.
yeah. And if you were a young musician and you didn't know it, they told you.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, years I was doing a singers jam session for years, and what an education, man. Because same thing, like, well, first of all, half of them don't know their key, so, but
Yeah.
then when they tell you, hey, you got to switch it up a sixth. They don't even, whatever key. You're just there. You just got to figure it out quick.
Yep.
That's cool. Christian McBride, obviously, I hold him in the highest regard. How'd you hook up with him?
I met Christian in 2000. He was and still is. He was running this jazz camp in Aspen, Colorado, for the Jazz Aspen Snowmass, and I was a member of that class of that year. I came out. He didn't know there was gonna be a vibes player, but I knew all of his music, and I didn't really expect anything from it. I just went out there and did what I was supposed to do. I'm having fun with the people because we were all young. Like Derek Hodge was there as a student, Dana Leon. I can't remember everybody, but we just had a good time there. So Christian was touring a group around 2006 called the Christian McBride Band with Terry on Gully, Ron Blake, and Jeff Keezer. And that group was pretty much fusion, somewhat straight ahead of jazz. So Christian actually wanted to do just a straight ahead project just for fun. So his people called me in the year 2007 and they said, Christian would like to hire you to play at the Village Vanguard. And it was only supposed to be a 1 week affair, 6 nights. And we had a great time with that band to the point where a lot of people was like, you need to keep this band together. So 2009 came around. I mean, we did a few gigs between 2007 and 2008. And I do mean a few, like 2 or 3, because he was still working the other band. We went down to South America and then we played the Monterey Jazz Festival. Right after we played the Monterey Jazz Festival that year, which was 2008, well, no, I'm sorry, 2009, they said we're going to stay in California. And we went to Berklee, California. We went to Fantasy Studios, which is no longer here, I should say. And we recorded his first record for Mack Avenue, titled Kind of Brown. And I was all of 25 years old, 26, somewhere around there. And here I am turning 45 this year, and we're still playing that music. So we've made 3 records since then. We did that one. We did another one called People Music, and we made a live record live at the Village Vanguard. We actually made that record like 7 years ago, but it came out just last year.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering about that. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's been a great time to play with him. I mean, I look at him as like the guru of the bass of today. He's recorded a few of my projects. He's done a few gigs with me out of his kindness. He's come down to Baltimore and just played a few gigs with me. Very cool guy, really good person to play with. Just a monster musician.
Yeah, he's incredible. I mean, certainly. So, I have the biography on Ray Brown coming out. And it's like he is that extension of.
Yeah.
He's the modern Ray Brown. It's like,
definitely, indeed.
It's so cool. All right, man. Yeah, I know you got to get to a rehearsal. What did I miss? Anything else you want people to know? We're going to be airing this on the podcast, and it's also for Jersey Jazz Magazine. So
okay,
goes well.
No, that's it. I mean, actually, I'll just mention. I'd like to say the record before the History of the Vibes that came out. If people are interested in really hearing what I have to say, my last record, which was called Chano Pozo, the one before this, Chano Pozo Origins. Chano Pozo is actually my nickname. This is not a tribute to the Latin percussionists.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, but on that record, besides the horns, I'm playing every instrument.
Oh wow! All right.
Drums, keys, it's key bass, but it's me. The vibes, organ, everything. Even the singing tracks is me. So people could check that out. And if people are just interested in following me on any of the socials, Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, my handle is just Warren Wolf, no E, Warren Wolf and the number 1. And they can find me there.
Sounds good, man. Very cool. Really nice talking to you.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe we'll play sometime.
I'm down. Just let me know.
All right, cool. Thanks, Warren.
Later.